Hello, everyone. Welcome to our peer-to-peer session, Finding Creative Clarity, Getting Organized. This is part 2 of the 3-part series, and this session forms part of the peer-to-peer series with New Bedford Creative. My name is Marianella Perry. I'm the Senior ARPA Fellow at New Bedford Creative, and thank you so much for joining us today. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest speaker, Catherine Carter, who will present about helping artists to determine their personal and professional goals by identifying and examining their deepest hopes and dreams.
Thanks, Marianella, and welcome everybody. A couple new faces from last time, but it's good to see all of you. My name is Catherine Carter, and I am an artist and art educator. I have been a professional artist for, I did the math, about 26 years. And I received a bachelor's degree from Lesley University and a Master of Fine Arts in Painting from UMass Dartmouth. My current studio space is located at Hatch Street Studios, which is in New Bedford. And half of the studio is a school from which I offer drawing and painting classes to children and to teens. And the other half is my painting space where I make large abstract paintings. And I sell those through consultants on a national level. So this, as Marianella said, this is the second part of 3 talks that I'm giving to help artists get in touch with their ideal creative lives and to start living them. Last week, we went over a series of questions to help you clarify your artistic dreams and goals. And this week, we'll talk about the ways in which the material things in your life affect your creativity and how to edit and curate them so that they support you best. In order for the things you want to come into your life, such as new circumstances, changes, improvements, you have to let go of the possessions and material things that no longer serve you to clear a physical space. This is true of both your artistic life and your personal life. In your studio or workspace, ideally in all the spaces you inhabit, such as your house, your car, etc., paring down helps you clarify. It's magical. Take my word for it. It's magical. You eliminate the physical things that are no longer of use to you, and all sorts of opportunities open up in all areas of your life. This is also true of people, of activities, of habits, but today we'll be talking about material things. Believe me, when you, when you have the courage to let go of the old, the new will come pouring in wonderful ways that you never could have imagined. So, as you clear out your possessions, keep the following points in mind. There are 4 specific points I want us to remember regarding material things, whether they're art-related material things in your life or in any other area of your life. So first of all, keep in mind that possessions are meant to serve you. You do not serve them. If owning something does not make your life better now, do not keep it. If you are investing your energy into upkeep, upgrades, maintenance, etc., of any item that is not directly helping you, then it is not serving you. You are serving it. Get rid of it. You don't want to let anything take your precious time or get in the way of your creativity. And point number 2, it can be difficult, but try to remove unproductive emotions from the decluttering process. I notice when I discuss material things and possessions with people, they often feel embarrassed to have, say, accumulated so much, or they feel ashamed, or they feel guilty that they spent money on something that they're not using, or they feel afraid about getting rid of it. And it's difficult. It's difficult not to feel these emotions. But instead, focus on how terrific it is that you are taking this step to improve your artistic life and allow your dream to flower. So if you're doing this, yay you. No reason to feel any of these not so productive emotions. Point number 3, everyone has different needs and preferences regarding their possessions. So just because something is new and trendy, or your neighbor has one, etc., you don't have to have it. Don't own something just to impress people or to keep up with the Joneses. On the other hand, you don't want to deprive yourself of something that you truly need or that you deeply want. There needs to be a balance, but don't let other people's preferences determine what you feel you need to have and must have. And point number 4, and perhaps this is the kind of the point of my entire talk, is that having space allows new energy to come into your life in the form of ideas, of people, of opportunities in all areas of your life. The new cannot come to you if it is blocked by the old. It takes guts to let stuff go. It takes courage to let stuff go, but it will transform your whole life in wonderful ways. Here are some practical tips on how to declutter your space. So this could be your studio, your art supplies, your old or current artworks. That's really what I'm focusing on in this talk. But these ideas could also be applied to any area of your life. So a closet or your attic or your garage or any area, any physical space in your life. So first of all, before you actually begin decluttering, you want to do some planning. First of all, read over your list from the last session so that your thoughts regarding your art career are fresh in your mind. In particular, think about your ideal studio space. Write down what you want and need in a studio, such as you might need an area to sit down and look at your artwork on a wall and kind of reflect upon it. Or you might need an easel. If you work flat, you might need a work table. You might need a shelving unit to hold your art supplies. If possible, draw this out as a floor plan so that you begin with a pretty clear idea of what you ideally want your finished workspace to look like. And then point number 2 here, have ways in place to get things out, the things that you decide not to keep any longer. Have a way planned ahead of time to physically get them out of your space. Otherwise, they'll just sit there, still taking up space, or worse, they'll kind of filter their way back into the useful possessions that you do want to keep. So for example, you might want to do some research into local schools, local libraries, local clubs that would want to have any of your art supplies that you decide not to keep any longer. You also want to have garbage bags or boxes or some receptacle ready to put things that you don't want into. A pile that you mean to get rid of might just sit there. It happens. And again, it could filter its way back into your workspace. So have garbage bags, have boxes, whatever you intend to kind of transport the unwanted items out in, have those at the ready and have more than you think you'll need. Number 3, create a timeline, such as, think of what free time you have. You might say, okay, every Thursday morning for 2 hours, the first thing I'm going to do when I get up on Thursday morning is work on my decluttering project. Or you might say, for the next month, I'm going to spend every Saturday from 9 to 1 working on this project. So, kind of have a timeline planned out for yourself and write this into a calendar so that it's like kind of a date for yourself, that it's all planned and written right into your calendar as a time that you intend to devote to accomplishing this. And number 4, pre-choreograph how you will proceed. So think about the space that you'll be working in and decide, okay, I'm going to work from left to right. So everything in the left-hand corner, I'm just going to keep going through until I get to the right-hand wall, for example. Or you might say, okay, I'm going to start by going through all of my art materials. And when I'm finished with that, I'm going to go through all of my older created artworks. But have a definite kind of start and finish plan in place. When decluttering day arrives, put on some music that inspires you and blast it through headphones and just plunge right in. And here are some specific suggestions on how to do that. So first of all, let's see. You must proceed in this manner. So there's no other way to do it but to start like this. And that is to take everything out of the area that you are decluttering, such as a shelf or a closet, and have an open space where you can take it out of whatever this structure is and put it on top. So whether it's a large work table or whether it's a spot on the floor with a tarp down there, everything has to physically come out. It doesn't work to just move things around and say, okay, I'll keep this and that. No, it has to entirely come out, or you won't be able to keep track of what is what. You won't remember, especially if you're coming back on a different day. You won't remember what you had set up. So here's what you do. Here's how to proceed. Take everything out, and you have to pick up every single item, whatever it may be, large or small, and ask yourself 3 questions. Do I definitely want this? Do I definitely not want this? Or am I not sure? You know, maybe I could use it, but I'm not quite sure. I don't feel comfortable totally getting rid of it, but I don't know if I'm going to want it. I just am not sure. If you do want it, if you definitely want it, put it back on the shelf, put it back in the closet. If you don't want it, go to one of those boxes or those bags that you had planned ahead of time, put it inside there and place it near the door. Once you've filled a bag or once you've filled a box, physically remove it from your work area, put it near the door where you will ultimately be removing it from. If you have items that you're not sure about, put them in a separately labeled bag or box somewhere away from your working area, but where you still have access to it, but it's not in your way. And if you find that 6 months go by and you haven't reached for it yet, you haven't needed it, you haven't wondered where it was, and by the way, do this, on your decluttering day, count 6 months into the future and write on your calendar, I haven't used items, out they go, right? Put that on a calendar. But then either donate them or trash them. But they either go back on the shelf because you definitely wanted them, or they head out. Keep in mind, this will make a huge mess, huge. This will be just everywhere, stuff. And it's very discouraging to be like, oh man, it's been 2 hours and I just feel like I'm being buried by all this stuff. Just keep on going. Just know that it's going to feel overwhelming. You're going to have a huge mess, and just keep on going. If you have to leave a mess and come back to it, such as if you're coming back a week later or you're coming back a day later, still don't put anything back on the shelf until you've looked at it and ask yourself those 3 questions above. Nothing gets clearance to be returned to the storage space until you're definitely sure that you want it. And then keep on going until you're done. Just keep going through that kind of sifting process until you're finished. And then here's the light at the end of the tunnel. Here's the joy, and the reason you do all this is because once you've eliminated all you don't need, what you do need will be left. It's like magic. Give yourself all the time you need to do this. So don't feel like, well, I only have today, so I better just make sure you have plenty of time. Add more time than you think you're going to need. It will make all the difference in the world. And when you've sorted through everything, so you only have a shelf of the things you're going to need, you only have a work table of the things you're going to need, you only have a closet of things you're going to need, set up your possessions so that they're neat. So, put all your oil paints together, put all your brushes together, put all your blades together, kind of keep everything so that at this point anyway, it looks neat. A few more things to consider about this process. Sometimes it's helpful if you really know you want to get rid of something, but you're hesitant, maybe it has some sentimental value for you, or you're just really not sure if you should get rid of it or not. Sometimes taking a photograph and then keeping the photograph and letting go of the actual item can be very helpful, because obviously it doesn't take up as much space. So you still have access towards the memory, but you don't have the physical thing in front of you taking up space. This works especially well with old artwork. So if you have 5 paintings that you'd like to remember how you made them, but you don't want to save them any longer, you don't really like the finished product, take a photograph. And that way you don't have that much physical space being taken up. I also wanted to address the idea of, I watch so many YouTube channels on this topic of decluttering, and a lot of the channel folks say, oh, I sold all my stuff and I made thousands of dollars from selling my things. Here's my personal take on that. First of all, if something works for you, that's great, go for it. However, to me, that process of whether it's eBay or whether it's Facebook Marketplace or whatever it may be, the process of deciding what to sell and uploading a photo, taking photos of it, uploading the photos of it, responding to queries, that type of thing, it takes a lot of energy away from time and energy that you could be using towards creating. So personally, I would rather give away the things I don't want any longer to someone who could really use them, or literally just throw them out if they're not usable any longer. But the whole sort of, let's make some money by selling our old stuff. It's a great philosophy, but just keep in mind, it does take quite a bit of time to go through that whole process. When you've gone through everything, there are some questions that I recommend you're asking yourself at this stage. And those are regarding your artwork. Presumably you've gone through your artwork and there are pieces that you love and want to keep. There are pieces that just weren't that successful. You might have a painting that your brother or your sister have always loved, and it's like, well, we got Christmas coming up, let's get it out of here. That type of thing. And you're left with the artwork that really means something to you and you want to hang on to. I recommend going through that artwork and picking out maybe 3 to 5 pieces or so that you really like, and then hang them on your wall, or if it's 3-dimensional, set it out on a work table as a group, and take some time to look at them and figure out what it is you like so much about them. Why are these 3 pieces or 5 pieces, whatever it may be, why does this series really mean a lot to you? And spend some time on this, spend like a whole day doing this. Just sit down with the work and then write down your thoughts and reactions. Regarding your workspace, when you have cleared out your studio space or your artistic creating space, when the items that you don't want are gone and you only have what you want left, sit down in your space with your possessions and just be there, just exist there, and get in touch with how you feel existing in that space. And then ask yourself a couple of questions. Do you feel like you're ready to start creating? Do you feel excited and energized by having cleared out, and you just like, I just want to grab a brush, or I just want to grab my camera and I just want to go for it, whatever your process is? Do you feel like there are other things you want to do to this space to improve it? Maybe you need some new furniture. Maybe you need a new work table or a new easel or some new blinds for your windows, or new art supplies. Maybe you're like, well, I got rid of all of that and it's time to buy new canvases. Think about it. Are there any possessions that you now want to acquire that would enhance your creative experience? And again, as you're sitting there and kind of becoming aware of how you feel, how you're responding to that decluttering process, and your possessions are all organized and ready to go, do you really enjoy this space? Does this feel like a productive space to you? Be honest. As I mentioned during some of those questions in the first presentation, really dig deep and say, do I feel like this is a productive space for me, or would I rather be somewhere else? And don't let that little voice going, well, this is a room in the house and this is what you can afford. Think about how you really honestly feel, how you would really want to proceed working in this space. Or would you rather do you need more room? Do you need an extra closet? Do you need others nearby? Start to think about those kinds of questions in relation to what you have left. And I also recommend, as part of this process, really journaling your feelings. Write down how you feel about them, how you respond to the new space, and how you feel about your creative practice after having released all of these items that you no longer need. This can be a difficult process. It can feel like you're letting go of your old self, your old artistic self, because you are. Basically, you are. By getting rid of these possessions, by getting rid of these things, you are kind of saying goodbye to your past in a way and admitting that certain things no longer fit who you are. So give yourself credit going through all of this. Give yourself credit for having done a really difficult thing. But I promise you, if you let go of anything, everything that is no longer meaningful to you, magic things will happen that you could not possibly have anticipated just from having done this. During my third talk, which will be on April 25th, we'll talk about specific steps to take in response to those questions that I posed during the first talk that will move you toward your desired artistic life. And that's it for today. So thank you.
I have a couple comments. One, I know we have some musicians on here. And so as I was thinking, like, this does relate to musicians because a lot of musicians have their own studio and how, you know, certain types of music or albums in particular inspire music and the musical practice. So I do think this relates to that. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that when Catherine was mentioning about donations, Marianelle and I have a whole list of nonprofit organizations, and you can do your own research and what might be appropriate if you want to donate materials, equipment, or supplies. There are a lot of youth organizations, immigrant organizations, elderly. I mean, you can pretty much pick the topic that you would like to donate to, and we could find an appropriate organization that you can check out before you give your supplies. But there's a lot of well-deserving organizations doing important work here in our communities that would love to receive some donated materials. I will say we went through professional decluttering when we were living in Boston, and it's a process. Yeah. And that was like a professional going through with us, and it took several days.
Right, we're actually going through that now where we're like, okay, we just tend to put stuff in the attic and the basement just to get it out of the way. And then I'm like, I don't remember the last time I even used this. So I'm like, you know what, let's just give it away. Or some stuff is broken. And I'm like, okay, it's in the trash. Oh, Crystal, go for it. Unmute yourself. I see your hands raised.
So I have a question about electronic decluttering. So I tend to save every communication ever, and I try to file it away, but then it's impossible to find it later. And so do you have any recommendations around that?
Part of what I talked about last week, Crystal, I don't know if you were here, but I was helping people to get really clear on what means something to you. So if I know LPs are coming back, let's say, but let's say you had an 8-track player and your 8-tracks and like it means something to you, don't get rid of it. This is for things that you know you're never going to use, that are really taking up space and that are in your way. But if it's something that you would actually enjoy or it's got real memories for you, I'd say keep it. It depends on what your personal kind of interests are. And
I think I'm thinking about more like professionally, like communications that might be helpful to reference later, and sort of drawing the line of like, I don't need 700 emails from Marianella, for example.
Oh, out. You can always back them up. You can always put them on, a disk or something like that, and then save that, and then they're not sort of slowing down your laptop or whatever it may be.
So save them to a thumb drive and then just keep
exactly.
the reference, maybe ones that I expect that I'll refer back to throughout the year.
I think so. You can always find stuff somewhere. I mean, you could always write to Marianelle and say, I just can't find that email you sent me in March. Could you send me a copy? So I just tend to clear it out.
I have a comment here from Helen saying, I have a hard time letting go of art done in high school and art school days 30 to 40 years ago. Even after taking photos, scans, still unable to part with them. Suggestions, please.
Helen, I feel the same way. If it really means something to you, and I'm like the biggest minimalist throw it out that ever existed on the face of the earth, and I still have like the first painting I ever did, or if something really has value to you and it's not getting in your way, or you have like a flat file. This is what I do. I have a flat file in this one drawer that's like devoted to my older stuff, and that doesn't really take up a lot of space. But when it gets to the point where you're like, oh man, this is from high school and this is from last year, and I'm trying to find that painting because someone asked about it, and it's then it's not good. But my point is, if it genuinely means something to you, keep it, because you can't redo something like that. And sometimes it's really exciting to go, oh man, like you touch it and you're like, oh, I remember that was before I learned I shouldn't use newsprint, but here it is with ink on it, or something like that. Sometimes it's nice to have the physical thing, but if it's starting to get in your way, out.
Next question from Paulina. She's asking, have any of you been stuck in your creative process because you don't have a proper place to work on your art? I see a lot of heads nodding.
During the third session, Paulina, one of the things I'm going to talk about is how to identify things that you really have to have as an artist. There's a wonderful book that I'll mention as part of your question. And this author lists the things that, if you're going to be an artist, if it really means something to you, if you're going to commit to it, having a space is really important. So I'll kind of talk about this next time, but it's really difficult to do anything seriously if you don't have, ideally, the four walls where you can just close the door. And I know, real estate can be expensive to rent and all these things, but if you're going to do it, you kind of have to find a way to do that. But I'll discuss this book next time. It's called, well, actually, there are a couple that address that, but there's this book called How to Be an Artist by Joanna Nagler, Nagler, and she has a chapter just about, these are the things you have to provide for yourself if you're really going to do this, take it seriously. But it is a really big deal. That the whole space issue is it's kind of the first step. It's a very big deal. Definitely.
Cedric, go ahead.
I was just going to say I can relate, because even if I can find or make space, being that I create music, I'd like to be able to work without being heard, so I can suck really bad over and over until, better with each thing I'd like to try. And that's just for me to feel comfortable, not to annoy anybody else, and to be able to and record these ideas without a boiler kicking on and it being caught in the recording or things like that. So I relate on that level.
We kind of talked about that again a little bit last week, Cedric, is the whole, if you kind of identify it, okay, what are like the top 5 things I want in the studio space? And that would be a real priority for you, and not letting the voices go, well, maybe I'll just practice in the afternoon when nobody's around, and I just didn't get to it today, I'll get to it tomorrow. And this kind of stuff can get away from you. And you really, if you can identify those things, again, next time I'll talk about how to kind of bring them into being. But just doing the decluttering kind of ushers them in, and having that list in your mind. If I really want a space where whatever time of day I choose to just go, I got an idea and I want to just go work it out and I don't want anyone to hear it, that's a real important priority. And as a musician, you owe it to yourself. You got to find a way to kind of provide that for yourself. And we're creative people, we can figure that stuff out. We can make it happen. But first you have to kind of identify it as a priority and really even like write it down. So you're like, nope, if you look at a space and you go, nope, this is an office area. So yeah, I can afford it, but I have next door neighbors all during the day. That means I could only play after 5 o'clock. No, it doesn't work for you. And you know it ahead of time.
I have another question here from Jessica saying, I struggle with feeling like my paintings are not good enough. So my question is, how long did it take for you to be comfortable showing your art?
you just kind of keep going and realize that this type of thing doesn't happen overnight. And that sometimes you make your absolute worst work in order to kind of like, okay, I'm never going to do that. I hate that color. I'm never touching it again. That brand of paint, nope, doesn't work for me. You know, you just kind of keep going through all the crap. And eventually one day, I promise, you're going to sit down at the easel and just go bing, bing, bing. And like your hand learned how to do it. Your brain knew how to do it. And you just like something rolls out and you're like, wow, that's what I've been struggling for all this time. So just kind of keep going through those, you know, I've had a really busy teaching semester, and now that it's starting to slow down, I've been going back into the studio, and I'd say over the last 2 weeks, I have made like 2 or 3 of the ugliest paintings that I have ever made in my entire, I mean, it's just like, I painted over them immediately because I was humiliated. Like, God, what if somebody comes in and sees this? So it happens to all of us. You just have to kind of keep like, believe that at the end of the tunnel, you're going to work through it. We all go through that, believe me.
I have a comment about this. I didn't attend the last session, but I watched the recording and went through the exercise of all the questions. And somebody had asked in there about like, am I an artist? Like, so doing art is not my full-time job. So at first, like feeling like you have imposter syndrome, to Jessica's point, like identifying as an artist, no matter how like bad you might think your art is, was really an eye-opening thing for me that came from like last session, when whoever it was asking like, I'm retired and I'm not really an artist. Like, you are an artist. If you make art, you are an artist. So that really resonated for me from the last session. So I just wanted to thank you for that conversation and bringing it back up again.
Good. I'm so glad, Crystal. I'm so glad to hear that. That's great. Because like I always say in my art classes, like, this is the most freaking fun thing that we could possibly do. I mean, Cedric, as a musician, you probably feel the same way. It's like, why doesn't everybody play an instrument? Why isn't everyone a musician? And I feel like that about painting. It's like, why would you do anything else? This is so much fun. So don't deprive yourself, you know, it's really fun.
I know, as you were talking about the decluttering and, you know, sometimes it's hard. How often have you gone through stages of, okay, I have to take this time, you know, I don't know, quarterly, monthly, I don't know. What would you say is a good beginning time frame to do it?
I was sort of saying this to Helen, like, you kind of know it's time when you feel like you can't find things, or you just kind of come in and go, oh, look at that shelf. This is just too much stuff on there. You know, you kind of will feel it naturally, but times to do this kind of present themselves to, like, say you're moving, or, you know, your friend calls you and says, you know, I found this really cool studio, but I can't afford it all by myself. Do you want to move in with me? You know, sometimes these opportunities come and you're like, well, if I'm going to do it, I got to clear stuff out. You move to another home or something like that. When it comes to like files and like paperwork and stuff, like my office, I do that at least once a year, like every January. You know, as a teacher, I tend to have a couple weeks off in January, so I'll do it definitely then. But, you know, at least once a year, you need to go through those kind of like record things. But usually it'll come up naturally. You'll just be like, oh man, I can't stand it another day. I got to do something.
Around Christmas time is when we have the kids. Okay, guys, now we know Santa's probably bringing presents. Let's donate some of nice toys to the kids that maybe won't get presents, you know, from Santa. And so I try to make that a time where I try to show up my kids, like, okay, things are coming in, things to be going out. Right. So I'm at least once a year with that. But
it's good that you declutter now with your kids, because when we moved to North Carolina, I still had kids' clothes, I'm sorry to say. But I decluttered a lot of things before I moved with the art coming down here. But I had a hard time moving here, trying to figure out how to do my art. But it's been about 5 years. I've been fooling around with watercolor, and first time I've shown some of my artwork. It just opened last week, a couple of my artwork. So So when you guys might have opportunity to start over again, things do happen in that respect. But emotionally, I had troubles with the move with creativity, and 5 years ago, my son had died. So that's just another thing.
It's so nice to see you, Priscilla. I haven't seen you in such a long time.
Well, because we moved 7 years ago.
Yeah, that's it. And congratulations on your show too. That's terrific.
Thanks. Just a couple of paintings, but it's something.
It's a show's a show, right?
Right.
That's great. Good, good.
Your comment about your kids made me think about, what do you do if you're sharing space with, or you live with, a hoarder? And how do you take these things and impose them on other people if you are sharing space that, like, their mess is impeding your creative process?
You can't. I mean, it's like Alcoholics Anonymous or something, Al-Anon. You can't. You can sort of designate spaces for yourself and say, well, this is my room and this is so-and-so's room, or, you know, a corner of a room, whatever it may be. But that's a difficult situation because you have two really different mindsets. Just try and have your own room, and that's like your sanctuary if you possibly can. Because you can't if someone's really, you know, literally hoarding, you know, that's really something that they need help with. If it's really genuinely, like, you know, tin foil balls or something like that, you know, that's really difficult, and that's not something you can kind of help someone with on your own. They really need professional help. So
that seems like it's also a lot to take on for you to try to basically fix that person's problem. It seems like it would then clutter you more to try to take that on.
Yeah, it all feels overwhelming. It's bad enough when it's your own stuff, but when you can't really throw out someone else's stuff, that's just not considerate. So it can feel like you're being overwhelmed. I understand.
And when I had decluttered before moving to North Carolina, it felt like a big weight was off my shoulders. Just saying, for the whole group of you guys, it's great to declutter.
Yep. Yeah, it really does feel like you've physically taken a backpack off your back or something like that. It makes a difference. Definitely. And then the phone starts to ring and opportunities start pouring in, and it's like magic. I'm telling you, it's just like magic.
I would offer, especially for those artists who are living or working here in New Bedford, that if you don't currently have your own space, but through this process of answering the questions with Catherine, you have determined your ideal space. That's something that Marianella and I at New Bedford Creative would be very interested in hearing about. And, you know, we can't make any promises, but we might have some opportunities that maybe you don't know about that we can refer you to. So, you know, especially after the last session with Catherine, or if you've already answered the questions and want to email us, Marianella, do you mind if I offer your email, that they email you with their ideal scenario?
Oh, you can reach out to me, and then we will talk about it. It doesn't hurt, you know, we can try. The worst thing that can happen is, you know, maybe not right now, or this is a better thing to look at. So there's options out there though.
There was some talk in one of the sessions about putting resources together in a library of sorts, of like not only spaces, but tangible art sort of items. And is that a work in progress? Like, where are we at with that? Like, is there a list of, like, here are like the artist spaces that are available in New Bedford, etc.? It's
a work in progress. So we are coming up on the end of a planning phase for it's a feasibility study for a business of art collaborative. It started as a business of art center, but we have determined that there's no one place that's going to meet all of the needs of every artist in every genre in the area. So there will be an online resource, and it might not happen until next year, but we will be expanding. For example, we have the new Bedford Creative Directory. We want to expand that to have more information, to be artist and user generated, so you can edit and update your own profiles, as well as have additional resources such as spaces, such as equipment, all of those things. The report will be done and we will share that with everyone by the end of spring. We're in the middle of it. And then the outcomes of that will most likely start, in early 2024. So stay tuned.
Okay, thank you.
New England Foundation for the Arts does have some resources for artists, and no matter what genre you are in, they have a directory. And especially for musicians, if you join, you can apply to become a touring, I can't remember what they call it, New England States touring artist, where they provide grants to venues to book artists. So I'm going to put that in the chat. This is also for visual arts and other genres of art. So definitely check that out.
So I want to thank everybody for their time this afternoon. This was a great session. And I'd like to also thank Catherine once again for all of her hard work.